Welcome in, everyone, for some Tuesday night college football talk here on Mark Rogers TV. We have just fired up the live stream, something that we're doing more often these days, and we'll certainly carry this through the rest of the offseason into the 2018 college football season. So I'm going to get my other monitor set here so I can check out your comments, your questions, your suggestions, and I can respond as we do the live stream here tonight. So thanks for joining me tonight for some college football talk. And I want to let you know right off the bat what we have scheduled for Wednesday night here on Mark Rogers TV. We've got some good guests coming your way. Billy Gomilla, he writes for And the Valley Shook. We've had him on a number of times through the years talking LSU football from SB Nation. Kevin McGuffey, last word in college football, to talk Kentucky with National Signing Day, of course, just 1 week away. We've got Parker Gabriel making his first appearance here on Mark Rogers TV. He joins us from Husker Extra. I have needed a Nebraska guy for a long, long time, and hopefully Parker Gabriel and I have a nice discussion tomorrow night, and he's able to come on a regular basis. And then also one of your faves, I get demands for Cam Underwood over and over and over and over. Cam Underwood, State of the U, SB Nation, will be on tomorrow night, and we'll release those segments here in the next several days. As you've noticed, and as you browse the videos, of course, we have long, lengthy conversations for college football with the likes of Cam Underwood and some of our other regular media contributors. We'll talk for 30 or 45 minutes. Then I'll break down the topics into bite-sized segments for you, 3 to 5 to 7 to 8 minutes. And you can pick out the video topics of your choosing and take in the college football. So again, Mark Rogers and Mark Rogers TV. If you're coming across my YouTube channel for the very first time, we talk college football. We do it each and every day. There is no off season. There is no downtime. We talk college football all the time. I have so many topics to cover over the next several months until we get you set for 2018 that I'm just about ready to explode. We've got, Dondre Crawford, Go Clemson Tigers, of course. And NCIS Fanatic 21. Mark, how are you doing today? I'm doing great. Hopefully both of you are as well, and hopefully a few more will jump on. We've got about 10 on the line watching right now. I know I surprised you with the live stream. As I mentioned, I believe the last time we did a live stream sometime last week, I would like to get the notifications out there for you guys to be able to plan ahead to join us for the live stream, and we can talk some college football. Go Irish from Johnny Bays. Johnny, I did not know that you were an Irish fan. I had no idea, based on some of your comments, your hundreds of comments. I didn't peg you as a Notre Dame fan. Appreciate that, Dondre Crawford. So I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. If I'm not, please correct me. But Mr. Crawford and myself have had many discussions, and we disagree all the time. But that is a class act when somebody jumps on and says, great show, love the content. We disagree. That's all right. That's great. And we've gone back and forth a few times on Clemson and whoever, fill in the blank, Ohio State, the Big Ten. Dondre Crawford, not a huge fan of the Big Ten. But again, we're diving into LSU, Nebraska, Kentucky, and Miami tomorrow night. I still have a load of segments to edit over the next few days to supply some great content for you. Hopefully you'll like it. If you have college football fans out there amongst your friends and family, let them know I'm around, and we'll talk up some college football. You probably noticed that over the past week or two, I've had a number of conversations on Ohio State football with Steve Hellwagon from 247 Sports, Tony Gerdeman, and Claire Crawford from the Ozone. We've talked Penn State with Black Shoe Diaries. Ella Moretta Felice is our guy there, along with Tim Aiden. Talked some Pitt football the other day. Not a whole lot of Pitt response. So I love to hit some of these teams that you're not going to see content on. But if I don't get the views, it's kind of difficult to keep going back to those conversations unless I can post that content somewhere where it can be found and seen and heard. So, for example, you guys notice that I have a ton of SB Nation contributors on here. I just felt that was a good platform to tap for these kind of college football conversations. And so let's say Cardiac Hill, that's the Pitt platform for SB Nation. If they're going to post my content, which they have many, many times in the past, that's great because the Pitt people are right there. They'll catch their Pitt football content. I don't have a whole lot of Pitt fans watching me, I don't think, because most of the time when I post Pitt football, unless it's connected to Penn State or Miami or someone else, not a whole lot of people are watching my Pitt football videos. But I would like that to change. Certainly have some other fan bases that have found me through the years. So I would like some others to do exactly that. NCIS Fanatic 21. It sounds hilarious that Jim Harbaugh only has one recruit in the top 100 while Urban Meyer has 8 to 10. Yeah, those were the numbers run down by Steve Hillwagon a few days ago when we talked about the disparity between Michigan and Ohio State and the Wolverines chasing also Penn State and Michigan State this past season. I think we've got a minor issue here in the household. Hang on just a second here. What are you looking for? Yeah. All right. South Carolina could win the SEC East in 2018. Well, that would be mighty a fine accomplishment by South Carolina. They've gone from 3 wins to 6 to 9. That might be asking a bit much based on what Georgia's got coming back, of course. They're a more talented roster, but South Carolina's got a shot. They're going to have a more veteran lineup. Certainly, than Georgia. So Will Muschamp has that pointed in the right direction. All right, Alonzo Oliver from the U family joined me just a few nights ago. We covered Miami football. Ryan Cantor from Shaking the Southland on Clemson football. SB Nation just released a video just before I jumped on here from Steve Dace. We mixed it up on his top 10. So Steve Dace releases the Michigan podcast, and we have him on from time to time, hopefully this Thursday night. And we talked about the release of his top 10. And if you've heard Steve Dace either on Michigan podcast or on my show, you know that Steve is very analytical. So he just doesn't look over the country and say, Clemson looks good, we'll put them number 1, we'll put Alabama number 2. And no, he goes through this very scientifically, looks through the schedule, looks through returning starters, coaching stability, quarterback stability, does a number of metrics, spits out his top 10, just released the first half of the discussion maybe a week ago, and then finished up the discussion just a few minutes ago and released that for you. Would love to hear your guys' take on Steve's top 10. Here it is. Dondre, I know you're going to love this. Clemson's number 1, Bama 2, Michigan State 3. I, of course, had to ask about that. Washington 4, Ohio State 5, Wisconsin 6, Georgia at 7, Oklahoma 8, Miami 9, Stanford 10. That was Steve Dace, Michigan podcast top 10 for this season. So, of course, Michigan State stands out at number 3. And considering the issues that they're having in not just the football program, but the athletic department and the entire campus right now, that could be certainly a wild card. Ricky writing us, why is Mizzou in the SEC East? Makes no geographic sense. They should swap with Auburn. So that point has been made a number of times by Mike Laval, who joins me from Last Word on College Football. And so if you know anything about SEC scheduling, you know that they have a situation where, of course, you play everyone in your own division. Then you play one rival in the other division. So if you're Alabama, you always play Tennessee. If you're Auburn, you're always playing Georgia. You have a set rivalry, LSU, Florida, and then the other ones don't make a whole lot of sense. They just had to match them up. And then you play a rotation against the rest of the division. And that could be easily fixed. You move Auburn to the West, just as Ricky points out here, move Missouri, to the West, Auburn to the East, and you still have Alabama play Auburn each year. Then you've got an issue with the Alabama-Tennessee rivalry. And if you're not huge into SEC football, you may not understand the relevance and the importance and the weight of the Alabama-Tennessee rivalry, but it's real. So I don't know that we've got a solution there. NCIS Fanatic 21, I'm a bit skeptical on Michigan State's ranking because of the whole sexual assault scandal going on right now. Not sure if Mark D'Antonio will be there next season. It's not looking real good. And I'm not one of these people that buy into the court of public opinion, as they say. I like to assume that everyone's innocent until proven guilty. So we'll see it play out. I like Mark D'Antonio. I don't know what he does behind closed doors, and I don't know what his values and ethics are in terms of a situation like this, what he would do, what actions he would take, or what he would ignore. So I'm not going to speak to that, but based on what he's shown us on the podium, on the sideline, I like Mark D'Antonio. I hope that he's better than that. Johnny Blaze. Is it Johnny Bays? It's Johnny Bays. My bad. Noel. Johnny Bays. Miami also stands out. 9 is too high. They played fairly sloppy last season, except versus the Irish, of course. So Miami had the 2 great home performances, of course. The one that Johnny alludes to against Notre Dame, 41-8. Complete annihilation, controlled the running game, dominated the run game, and what was supposed to be one of the best offensive lines in the country. Miami's losing a lot along the defensive front, R.J. McIntosh in particular. The secondary's basically intact, although they lose Malik Young. Of course, unfortunately, his football career is over. It's going to come down to the quarterback situation because they should have running back play that's a little bit better than it was last year, with Lorenzo Lingard, the 5-star, coming in to help Travis Homer and DJ Dallas. Wide receivers, no issue. Hopefully, Amon Richards is fine and healthy and ready to go. And we'll do a much better job of covering Miami football tomorrow night with Cam Underwood. But, yeah, the other game I was going to refer to, Dondre, is Miami, Virginia Tech at home. That was the other second solid performance. The first one, a great performance against Notre Dame. They controlled, they dominated Virginia Tech. It was a closer game. The Hokies had their shot, but the Canes defense dominated that game. Other than that, Toledo played them close. North Carolina played them close. Virginia really gave them a run. Kurt Benkert looked like Tom Brady in the first half and was slinging it all over the field. And there were about 2 or 3 plays that made it happen for the Canes. One was the Jawan Jackson pick 6 that turned it around. Otherwise, my goodness, the Canes did not look good against really anyone else. Florida State, that was early in the season when Blackman was not playing well. Dondre writes, what do you think about BC and Wake Forest being dark horses in the ACC? All right, Wake Forest doesn't surprise me. Based on what we saw the latter half of 2016, the team that beat Temple and showed off its defense against the Owls in postseason play, then coming back this year. I don't know what their backup quarterback situation is. We'll have to have our guy, Robert Reinhardt, on from Blogger So Dear. That's the other SB Nation platform there for Wake. Have him on. See what their backup quarterback situation is. I need to look into that because John Walford was probably one of the best secrets kept in college football over the past couple years. When he first hit the scene, he was forced into starting as a freshman, and it was woeful. It was awful. I think the best example was a 3-0 game against BC at home. Wake, BC, 3-0 game. And it was that putrid offensively for both teams. But he got better and better and better. The offensive line was improved. Dave Clawson has done a remarkable job at Wake Forest. They are legitimately good. Of course, got the bowl win against Texas A&M this year, took Florida State to the wire. Strong season for them at 8-5, but I don't know about the quarterback situation because the running backs and the wide receivers, and I'm losing their names off the top of my head, but I watched that bowl game start to finish. I could not believe I was watching Wake Forest. Their offensive pass efficiency has gone from in the 100s a couple years ago to top 15 in the nation this past season. So if they've got another quarterback in play who can replace Wolford and what he was able to do the last 2 years, Wake could be a player. Agree with that. Jim Harbaugh has never beaten my Iowa Hawkeyes. So he's 0-1. That it? 0-1, Ricky? Just the one time last season in Iowa City, close game. Would be the one that would come to mind. I can't imagine that Jim Harbaugh's had any other games against Iowa as a head coach. Yes, Hilton started a few games. Definitely the Kendall Hinton is the quarterback's name from Wake. Not nearly the passer that Wolford is. Better running threat, quicker. A.J. Dillon, a stud. Yes, Ricky for BC. They just relied on him, gave him the football over and over and over and over. He was a workhorse last season for BC. Think about who BC beat this past year. Louisville did not meet expectations, but between BC and Wake, they were winning games nobody expected them to. BC over Louisville in particular. Dual threat quarterback, yes. Kendall Hinton out of Wake Forest. Oh, so Ricky's going back to Jim Harbaugh's playing days, going back to the mid-'80s. And, of course, 1985 is the season in which Iowa was number one most of the season with Chuck Long, who narrowly lost the Heisman Trophy to Bo Jackson by, I believe, the closest vote in the history of the Heisman Trophy. Chuck Long finishing second to Bo Jackson. Iowa lost just the one game in Columbus to Ohio State that knocked them out of the national championship race. But they beat Michigan in a 12-10 game, all field goals, 12-10 in that game against Jim Harbaugh. More importantly, Jim Harbaugh has never beaten The Ohio State University. So we're mixing coach and player. Harbaugh over Ohio State as a player a number of times. 85, 86, not as a coach. 04, 2014, 15, 16, 17. Jim Harbaugh against Iowa, I guess, has never beaten them. I would have to look that up because, yes, as you mentioned here, Ricky, 1985, I vividly remember that game at Iowa City. Late afternoon game, huge game between Michigan and Iowa. Okay, well, we'll stop talking about 1985 for as much as, believe me, if you guys want to start or have me start analyzing history and historical games and scores and players, that's my wheelhouse. Ohio State's never beaten Clemson. We know that, Andre. 1978 Gator Bowl, the Woody Hayes punching Charlie Bauman game, and of course, just twice in the last 4 or 5 years, the Orange Bowl game, really good game, 40-35, and then the complete and utter destruction of J.T. Barrett and company, the offense, 31-0 in the playoffs. So you guys write in whatever you'd like in terms of what I'd like to get out of you guys, suggestions for content, and you guys gave me a ton, and I'm not going to be able to get to all of it, but I'm going to give it my best. And also, what guests would you like to see on the show? Again, you hear analysis from me, so I'm going to cover it myself. I'm going to give you my analysis, but I also like to bring on other perspectives. Johnny would love a history of videos. That would be a great series. We can work on that. So what contributors? So I'm missing Florida State and Nebraska desperately. Again, as I mentioned off the top, Parker Gabriel, Husker Extra, is joining me tomorrow night. Hopefully he's going to become a regular, and we hope that Parker delivers. I'm sure he will. He's from a respectable site. What do you think about North Carolina in football? They are healthy. Well, that was the thing. They started off bad and it got worse because they lost more players and more minutes and more starting players than I believe anybody in Power 5 football, if not the FBS. So I saw North Carolina play against Louisville and Miami in particular. I did see those two games, and I was fairly impressed. They weren't awful. They went to Pitt, of course, it was a Thursday night game, the week before Pitt knocked off Miami. North Carolina went up there with nothing to play for in the cold and knocked off Pitt. So that showed me something. So Larry Fedora obviously has had a pretty successful run in Chapel Hill, and I would consider this past season to be a bit of an aberration. We knew with all those NFL players leaving, especially at wide receiver, and then Mitch Trubisky, Ryan Switzer, Matt Collins, Rashad Davis, all those guys, Elijah Hood, that North Carolina was going to be bad this past year. And then the injuries just made it awful. Xavier writing in, Xavier Hill, how will South Carolina do in 2018? I think 11-1 or 10-2. So I don't have their schedule. Of course, they play the final game of the season against Clemson, of course. They've got Georgia. Other than the Georgia game, they should sweep the East. I wouldn't be surprised if they tripped up against a Kentucky or Mizzou, but they should sweep the East other than Georgia. So there's a loss. Clemson's a loss. But let's say they split one of those two. That's Dondre. Xavier Hill is dreaming. You know, Dondre, it wasn't that long ago that South Carolina won, was it 5 consecutive or 6 straight against Clemson? So the dominance hasn't been in play that long. It was just at the end of Steve Spurrier's run that South Carolina was dominating that series. Haven't seen any Notre Dame guests in a little while. You know, I'd love some Notre Dame videos. You know, I didn't know that, Johnny, before. You write in about everybody, which is really good of you as a college football fan. I love that. Didn't know that you were a Notre Dame fan. So let me track down. Oh, I bring so many people on here, I can't remember their names. Andrew Hall. Andrew Hall slapped the sign, fan-sided Notre Dame. But yeah, 11-1, 10-2 for South Carolina. Xavier, a bit of a stretch, I would think, but not too much of one. They just went 9-4. And let's see how they play against the really top teams on their schedule. This past season, they didn't embarrass themselves against Georgia, but they were never really in the game. Of course, they were just blasted by Clemson. And of course, Texas A&M was better. They lost by 7 points on the road. That should be a game that they're more competitive in this next season against Jimbo and company. Clemson winning the series against South Carolina 68-42. I'd love to look through the scores of that series because basically you've had Clemson has been a really good football program almost throughout its history. When I say really good, not elite, not a blue blood as it is now. Nothing close. Dondre knows this. Clemson has been through I'm a little bit older than you guys probably, but through the times that we've watched college football, Clemson has been a bowl team. They've been a 7-5, 8-4, 7-5 over and over and over if you go through the 80s and 90s. Of course, they had the national championship team in 81, and they had a couple teams that would sprinkle in a 10-win season once in a while. But Tommy West and Tommy Bowden and all those guys, Danny Ford at the end of his run, it was a lot of 7-5, 6-6. Of course, there was the 11-game schedule back then, so a lot of 6-5, 7-4s back then for Clemson. Of course, the last 5 years, dominant, 1981 national champion. But they've generally been better than South Carolina because South Carolina's football history is not good. When they won 11 games, 3 consecutive years under Steve Spurrier with Stephen Garcia at quarterback, that's about as good as it's been. Ricky, I would love to see Iowa play Notre Dame again. Do you know that they played 24 times. I did not know that. That must have been a long, long time ago. The problem that Iowa has in its scheduling is that, like the teams in the SEC Eastern Division, Georgia, Kentucky, Florida, they have a natural rival in Iowa State. So they always schedule Iowa State. I shouldn't really phrase this as a problem because it shouldn't be a problem, because Iowa should beat Iowa State 8 or 9 out of 10 years. They're just a better football program, and they refuse to schedule anybody else. It's always, and now that there's 9 Big Ten games, there's only 3 non-conference games. And if Iowa's got Iowa State, which they always will, then they're just not going to schedule anyone else. And they've met their requirement set down by the Big Ten to schedule a Power 5. But you talk about a boring schedule, a bad schedule, and a boring schedule. Iowa fans have nothing to look forward to in the non-conference because they know they're always going to see Iowa State and nobody else. Iowa State does need to step it up and schedule somebody else. Dante, so what's the consensus? Does Miami get the American Heritage boys? Yeah, so that's another thing I've been focusing on over the past few days. If you've got the videos, I have been running through the ESPN 300, and I know that ESPN is not the recruiting standard, but I've looked through 24/7 and the other services to run through who the best available players on the board are, and give you a little profile, a little sneak peek, kind of condense all that information that you would have to go to 247 Sports and Rivals and ESPN and all over the place for, and try to find a fun fact or 2 scouting reports and a few nuggets there, and condense that down into a video. And I've run through some of the best players in the country, including those American Heritage boys. You got Tyson Campbell at a corner, and you've got Patrick Surtain, who many of us remember watching his dad play for the Miami Dolphins, and before that, Southern Miss. I was actually down in Mississippi working at a CBS station covering Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Alabama, and to a lesser extent, Southern Miss football when Patrick Surtain was down there. Patrick Surtain, a senior who is now the head coach at American Heritage and has won 2 consecutive state championships with his boy playing cornerback. All right, let's get some clutter off the screen so I can see your comments. NCIS Fanatic 21. I was really rooting for Marcus Lattimore to do well in the NFL. Seems like a great person. Yes, of course, Marcus Lattimore tore his ACL, MCL, ACL. I believe it was one of the 2. I can't remember specifics. ACL, MCL. Twice in South Carolina. Explosive, powerful back who was a serviceable back because of the injury at the end of his career in college. Then he moved on to the San Francisco 49ers and had a quick stay in the NFL. Great update. I like your channel a lot. Thank you, sir. Appreciate the comment. I don't think I've seen you comment before, so you're welcome anytime to ask me questions, deliver your comments, call me on something. If you think I've missed it on something, I enjoy the discussion and the debate. We all try to be very respectful here. That doesn't always happen, but that's okay. Johnny, top quarterback in the draft, in your opinion? I'd say Mayfield. Any thoughts on the Kirk Cousins, Alex Smith trade? So I'm a huge NFL fan, but I don't get into the specifics much, unfortunately. Because you guys can tell I'm doing this all the time. I'm doing this a lot, producing these videos. So I'm not into the stats and the trades and the transactions and all of that like I used to be with the NFL. I just sit on the couch on Sunday afternoon, spit out these videos while I keep an eye on the Red Zone channel, is the extent of my NFL, I won't say knowledge, but in actually keeping up with the news. Alex Smith to Washington. Well, I think Alex Smith is a really good quarterback. And he has, under Andy Reid, and we'll see if now he suffers from not being under an offensive-minded coach. And despite Andy Reid's issues coaching in big games, winning big games, both at Philadelphia and more so now at Kansas City, losing to the Tennessee Titans at home as a 9-point favorite. Andy Reid's had too many of those throughout his career. And the Chiefs franchise, Marty Schottenheimer being at the forefront of this, have had too many of these types of playoff appearances. But we'll see if Alex Smith suffers from not being in an Andy Reid offense. That's my question. I would think at this stage of his development and growth, which means he's near the end of the line, he's already experienced most of his development as Alex Smith, that he should be able to transition to Washington. All right. We've got Dondre Crawford. Sam Darnold is overrated. So I was just asked who the best quarterback in the draft is. And who was it said Mayfield. So Mayfield's the best college quarterback out of all the guys selected. Out of Allen, Rosen, Darnold, Mayfield, Baker. I don't think there's much argument there that he's the best college quarterback. And I thought he was a bit of a stereotypical college quarterback until I really watched him and saw what he was able to do against a couple elite defenses in Ohio State and Georgia this year. And even before that, he has legitimate arm strength. Most of his style of quarterback don't have that kind of arm strength. And Baker Mayfield may be, unlike Johnny Manziel, and who else comes to mind? RG3 might be big enough, tough enough, and have the arm strength to transition to the NFL and be successful. Russell Wilson, of course, did it, and nobody expected that, or few people did. I wasn't surprised based on what he accomplished at Wisconsin that he was able to make that transition. Sam Darnold is the most physically ready to play in the NFL. Dondre, I know you don't like that, but he's physically the most capable of playing in the NFL right now. If somebody had to start day one, I would take Darnold, but the other guys may surpass him. I know Mayfield did nothing against Clemson. He was running for his life during that game. That Oklahoma offensive line, that is probably the biggest improvement that Oklahoma made from their first playoff appearance in 2015 to what we saw a month ago against Georgia. Offensive line protecting Baker Mayfield. He did not have a chance against that Clemson defensive front. He was running scared and all over the place, and I would be too, against that Clemson D line. All right. What have I missed here? Smith is good. Just think Cousins is better. So Kirk Cousins is, I'm trying to think of age here. Let's see. He's probably he was playing up till about 2010 or 11 at Michigan State. Alex Smith, obviously, his last season at Utah was 2004. He was in the Aaron Rodgers draft in 2005. So yeah, the Redskins are trading in a quarterback who's in his prime for a guy who's in his prime, but his prime may end soon. Nobody else is Tom Brady. Xavier, I think that Georgia's youth will cost them the SEC East. So we were making that point a few minutes ago when somebody was jumping on the South Carolina bandwagon that may not be so far-fetched, that South Carolina is not as talented roster top to bottom as Georgia, but based on the progress that they made this year and all these guys coming back and having beaten Michigan, having played against teams like Clemson and knowing what the measuring stick is, that's a good point. I agree with the Clemson loss, but I have us doing really good. So Xavier is obviously a South Carolina fan. So Xavier, I don't know how long you've been watching our channel here, but during the football season, each and every Friday, I have on Will Gunter. He's from 107.5 The Game in Columbia, South Carolina. We talk South Carolina football top to bottom, and I need to have Will on back very soon. Darnold should be fine in the NFL as long as he doesn't have Damon Webb. Better weapons in Kansas City. I'm a Redskins fan, and Smith is something. Ton on offense. Yeah, the Kansas City weapons, Kelsey and Tyreek Hill and so forth. Serious stuff right there. And now with the Toledo back, forgetting his name, the Toledo Rockets back, rookie back there for Kansas City. All right, what do we have here? Redskins fan, Smith is losing a ton on offense. Yes, he certainly is. Okay, I'm going to reset here and let you know that tomorrow night you will see LSU coverage from Billy Gomilla. We have him on from SB Nation's and the Valley Shook. Kevin McGuffey, last word on college football to talk Kentucky. Parker Gabriel for the very first time on Mark Rogers TV from Husker Extra. Need some Nebraska coverage. And yes, Kareem Hunt. Yes, thank you. Cam Underwood, State of the U, SB Nation. I know that folks out there are clamoring for some Cam Underwood coverage of Miami. And recently, Ohio State, Penn State, Pitt, Miami, Clemson, Georgia, Virginia, Alabama, all sorts of coverage out there. I was also going to dive into the ACC schedule that was released sometime last week. Anything stand out on this one? Boston College, their big non-conference game is Purdue. Clemson's got, of course, a date with Dabo taking on Jimbo. But Jimbo not at Florida State now, at Texas A&M, but he couldn't get away from Clemson, could he? So that's a College Station in week 2. I'm sure Jandre will have tons to say about the Texas A&M Clemson matchup. And then, of course, the South Carolina game late in the season. Florida State's got a difficult slate considering Virginia Tech week 1. They've got, of course, Florida, Notre Dame out of conference. Northern Illinois won't be a walk in the park. Louisville's got Alabama out of the gate. Wouldn't we have wanted to see Lamar Jackson against Alabama? It's still the Cardinals and Bobby Petrino against the Alabama Crimson Tide. And, of course, the Kentucky game at the end of the season for Louisville. Just trying to pick out the best non-conference games in the ACC coming up this fall. For NC State, they play West Virginia. Good game there. Syracuse has Notre Dame late in the season. Wake Forest has Notre Dame as well. They open with Tulane. Out of the Coastal Division, you've got Duke taking on Northwestern. So what is it with Northwestern and Duke? They might as well move into the same conference together. They're playing all the time. They've played like 4 or 5 straight years now. Duke, Northwestern, I know that it makes sense. Decent football programs. Northwestern a little bit better, although they lost to Duke last year on the road and got killed. But they play all the time now. Georgia Tech has, of course, Georgia at the end. Do they play anybody else? I don't see anyone. So South Florida, Georgia Tech, South Florida. And one of the games that we missed as college football fans this year was, of course, Central Florida playing Georgia Tech. And, of course, Georgia Tech was a little bit down. They only went 5-6, but it would have been interesting to see Central Florida line up against one other Power 5 and have that other test. Of course, Miami, LSU. There you go. I can't wait for them to get together. That might be my favorite non-conference game as it stands right now. The one that I'm looking forward to the most. Miami, LSU. Miami does not play anyone else of substance out of conference that I can see here. North Carolina with a home and home against Cal. They lost that game last year. They've got Cal on the road to open the season. And really nobody else on the slate. We've got Pitt taking on Penn State again. That's a 3rd straight year against Penn State. Virginia has a date with Indiana. What is this with Indiana and Virginia? They already played their home and home. They're going to play again. So here it is, like Northwestern and Duke. Virginia, Indiana. Is there any reason why they need to continue playing? I can't wait to unleash my scheduling formula on you guys. I will get to that sometime very soon. Florida State, yes, Andre has a hard schedule. Here it is. Let's go top to bottom with Florida State. And I cannot see, I apologize, I cannot see where the games are. Florida State's 2018 slate: Virginia Tech, and then somebody of not much significance that I can't read. Man, I apologize. This is awful. Need to take the contacts out. I believe it's Samford. Then it's North Carolina State. No, it's Syracuse in week 3. Then it's Northern Illinois, Louisville, Miami. You guys are laughing at me. You got to be. Open date for Florida State. Then Wake, Clemson, North Carolina State. Tough stretch. Notre Dame. After the bye, Florida State's got Wake, Clemson, North Carolina State, and Notre Dame. Then finish up with Boston College and Florida. Yes. And if you guys have followed me during the off seasons, you know that I love to rank the schedules. So that's coming. It's going to come earlier this season. I can't be throwing out those schedule previews like 2 days before the season opens, but I get backed up. There's 68 of them in the Power 5, but I'm going to try to get that out like in May or June. And I rank all the schedules. It takes some time, but I rank all the schedules. And Florida State is an early favorite for number 1. Toughest schedule in the country. Ricky, Woody Hayes shouldn't have punched that Clemson player. Charlie Ballman, number 55 for Clemson, picked off Art Schlichter. I should run trivia on here. Anyway, Art Schlichter, who was a freshman quarterback at Ohio State. Listen to this touchdown to interception ratio for Art Schlichter in 1978, who was a prized recruit, top 2 or 3 quarterback in the nation. 4 touchdowns, 21 interceptions. But he finished in the top 5 in the Heisman. The next season, Ohio State came within 1 point of winning the national championship. Dondre, why does Virginia's football program have so much trouble? Well, they have for the past 10 years. Now, if you go from the late 70s under George Welsh into the early 2000s, Virginia was not a great football program, but they were somewhat consistently finishing in the top 25 in the nation. Go to Wikipedia, look at Virginia football history. It's not been great. I work with a huge, you've never met anyone like this concerning Virginia football, huge Virginia football fan. Athletic department, top to bottom, but we talk football, of course, here. And I had to let him know the other day when he said, I can't wait till Virginia football gets back to being great. And I said, Virginia football has never been great. And he's like, well, we were great, I think, in the 80s. And he picked out a few years. And I said, no, you were not great. I can almost guarantee Virginia has never finished in the final top 10. We looked it up. No. 12, 13, about as high as Virginia has ever ranked at the conclusion of a football season. But with the likes of Herman Moore, Sean Moore, Tiki and Rondé Barber, Ahmad Brooks. Yeah, they've had Thomas Jones at running back. So I'm going through some of their top players in the 80s, 90s, going into the 2000s. Virginia, very good. Going to bowl games every year without miss most of the time from the late 70s into the 2000s. The last 10 years have been awful. But Virginia as a state has pretty good football talent. Then if you bring in the DC area, go into the Carolinas for talent, up to Maryland that has pretty good football talent, and even Virginia, you would think would be able to get into Pennsylvania for some talent, that Virginia should be able to field a pretty good football program. Yes, Dondre, 1990-91. I remember them playing Illinois in a bowl game with Jeff George. Look at the mid-90s. They played Georgia 3 times in bowl games, twice in the Peach Bowl, one in the I should throw this out as a trivia question because I don't think anyone will get this unless they look it up. Virginia, Georgia played in 2 Peach Bowls, but they also played in another bowl game in the 90s. I'll leave it right there and I'll answer it soon. They weren't bad when Tiki Barber was there. And of course, Rondé on the other side, who was actually as good, if not a better player. But because he was a cornerback and not handling the ball, people more know Tiki Barber, especially NFL fans from his days with the Giants and going to the Super Bowl and being a multi-purpose back who would catch a ton of passes. Yes, Ricky, believe it. Minnesota dominant in the 1940s. If you saw a list, if we compiled a list of national championships all time, Minnesota would be down the list, but not far down the list. Minnesota won its last national championship in 1960, which seems like forever ago. And of course it is, but it's still somewhat modern football. 1960. Nice shot, Dondre. No, was not the All-American Bowl for Georgia and Virginia. If there's one thing I remember, it's bowl games. So was Chicago and Yale. Yes, they were strong. Of course, Chicago produced what? What major award winner did Chicago produce? The University of Chicago. This is historic. I'll leave that one out there too. Georgia Virginia Bowl game in the 1990s. Where did they play other than the 2 Peach Bowl games? Yeah, stick 118. You're a little bit late, and we've got 2 trivia questions out there that just came off based on the conversation here that I came up with. One being, if you loved watching college football in the 1990s, think Georgia and Virginia. They played in 3 bowl games. 2 were at the Peach Bowl. They split those games. They also played a close game. I think it was a close game in another destination, well across the country. I'll give that hint. Georgia, Virginia, mid-90s. Think Hines Ward and that crew. Also, what was the other question? Concerning, yes, a Chicago award winner from the University of Chicago. And this is significant for a very obvious reason once you get the answer. University of Chicago. Yes. Thank you, Dondre. First Heisman Trophy winner, 1935, Jay Berwanger out of the University of Chicago. Harvard Stadium doesn't have seats. They sit on stone. I like it. Yeah, it's a unique stadium. I have yet to go there, and it's only maybe about 70 minutes away for me, but I have yet to go. Wouldn't it be cool this fall to probably more so on Thursdays and Fridays, because I try to set up the Command Central on Saturday and catch all the games, but on a Thursday or Friday night, if I can get out to a game, maybe I can get to Rutgers or BC, based on the location of the game, that I can maybe do a live show from the game, set up a stand out where people are tailgating, Mark Rogers TV banner, and we'll talk college football from the stadium. Did we run through the rest of the ACC schedule? I think we were at Pitt taking on Penn State. That's their big out-of-conference game. Obviously, they also have Central Florida. Pitt and Central Florida. So this is what I applaud, scheduling 2 difficult non-conference games, especially if you're only playing 8 in-conference ACC, SEC. Schedule 2 tough non-conference games. Although Pitt doesn't know what it was getting into when it scheduled this game, I'm sure. All right, we've got Virginia taking on Indiana. We talked about that. Okay, and then finally we've got the Hokies, and they've got a thing about taking on East Carolina. They've got a thing for East Carolina, and that seems to be the one game on Virginia Tech's schedule other than a date against Notre Dame. All right. NFL draft coming up in a few months, and we will really start to dig in sometime in March and April. Last year, we had the NFL Draft Bible was our main source for NFL Draft. So how much do you guys care? This is a good question for a college football setting and college football fans. How much do you guys care about the NFL Draft? Because a lot of college football fans don't care. Once the guy leaves their team, see ya. I just focus on college football. Other people love the NFL Draft and they love the NFL as well. So a lot of college football fans obviously just love football. So they love the NFL as well, and therefore the NFL draft. Some don't pay too much attention to the NFL, but because it's the NFL draft and because it's the best of college football and they want to see kind of that final stage of those players' collegiate careers play out, they pay attention to the NFL draft. So you guys let me know how much NFL draft coverage you'd like. In past seasons, I've had a ton. I would sit here all night on draft night and deliver updates and my thoughts on each round. Will Cincinnati and West Virginia join the ACC? Well, West Virginia would be the first of those two to join the ACC for obvious reasons. They have proven to be a capable program and have the fan base and the proximity, although Cincinnati, obviously, if the ACC is ventured up to Boston and Syracuse, it can certainly go to Cincinnati. It's a close proximity and would tie into a Louisville rivalry. But West Virginia would be the obvious choice. So, Dondre, you must be thinking we're going to 16-team power conferences. That's been the talk here for the last 10 years, ever since Nebraska became the first domino to fall in this whole equation that's affected the Big Ten and the SEC and the Big 12. And, of course, the ACC. I should say Nebraska, the latest that then sparked that second round. Of course, the Big East changing and Virginia Tech and Miami moving on to the ACC was huge. Miami, Notre Dame, early 90s. Yes, they played. Okay, we're talking Michigan, Notre Dame. Sorry, Dondre. I thought you were going the Miami route. Michigan, Notre Dame. One of my favorite matchups each and every year. Now, if you guys have caught Steve Dace from Michigan Podcast, we have him on as much as we can get him. He hates that game. So he's, of course, Michigan through and through. He hates that game because it forces Michigan to play another huge game, another tough opponent. And he doesn't like to be locked down to the Notre Dame game because it hurts Michigan's scope, recruiting scope. He doesn't want to be locked down to just we play Notre Dame, then the Big Ten schedule. That's his philosophy, and he can explain it better than I just did. NCIS Fanatic 21. I don't think Luke Fickell would do very well in the ACC. Johnny, I care very little for the NFL aside from my team and Notre Dame players. So, Johnny, who do you root for? Ricky, I've got no thoughts about the XFL. That's a freak show. It's entertainment. So do you guys like wrestling? If you like wrestling, you probably like the XFL. Did I watch it at the time? No, I didn't watch it. Yeah, did I see a play here and there? The XFL is a show. Unfortunately, you have to kick the ball off and finally play some football. And that's what part of the demise was you can bring on the best looking women, you can have the fireworks, you can have the clowns and the characters on the sidelines, and you've got the commissioner that is perfect for that sport to talk it up and hype it up, and you can go through all the theatrics and put on a great show, but at some point you got to kick the ball off, and then people have to be entertained by the football product. And that's where the XFL couldn't deliver. Saints fans, stick 118. Got to be happy with your team, but you have to be just completely demoralized by that last play by the Minnesota Vikings. Can't stand wrestling, nor can I. I'm right there with you. Arena football's fun. I actually went to a game once. I've not gone in person, but I can see that. It's still I'm pretty much of a purist, so I'm kind of boring that way. Arena football, fine. I'll give the XFL a chance. Yeah, give it a shot. Give it a shot. So I would like to do more of these live streams in the future. And I think I explained last time that I don't want to bother you guys by sending out notifications that I'm not going to be able to use. So I have not figured out, this is the extent of my tech knowledge. I've not figured out a way to send out the notification. So let's say I want to send out a notification that on Friday night at 8 o'clock, I'm going to do a live stream. And I want to send that out early in the morning. And then what's the difficult portion of me, and I got to test this out, is to be able to jump on the same link, the same line that you guys receive. Not been able to figure that out. So what ends up happening is I send out a notification that I'm going to be on at 8 o'clock on Friday night, but then the time comes and I can't find the link. And then you guys might get frustrated because you see that I used another link because I started a whole other show. If that makes sense. If you run a YouTube channel, that makes perfect sense to you. If you don't, just never mind. And that will be important because of some of the changes that I'm making to the channel and how I'm going to deliver content going forward after I take a little time off and come back. Not that you're going to notice that I really take time off, because I'm going to spread out the content well enough to kind of cover some vacation time. But sometime in late February, I'm going to make a few changes that I hope are an improvement and free me up to do some other things as well. Did a mailbag segment with Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama the other night. We talked about Robert Foster. We talked about the quarterback situation at Alabama. So I want to do that more often as well, to take the comments and the questions and the suggestions that you guys send me and deliver the answer. I try to get back to as many of you as possible. You can see that, but that's, with 7,000 comments last year, not possible. So, and then it turns into a fun segment by actually answering the mail and recording that. Greatest rivalry without a trophy: Notre Dame versus Michigan. My idea is the golden chicken given to the loser of the game for those who remember Michigan playing the chicken dance song last meeting. All right. Serve that one up to Jim Harbaugh and Brian Kelly, of course. I wouldn't think either one of them would go for that, but if somebody did out of those two, it would definitely be Harbaugh. LSU always gets some good players, but not that quarterback who can lead them to a natty. Well, they won a couple national championships with better than marginal, but not great quarterbacks in 2003 and 2007 under Nick Saban and Les Miles. LSU head coach will be fired this year. Okay. I don't know that they're expecting championships out of Ed Ogeron right now, Dondre. So I believe if LSU goes 8-4, he's probably safe. They will expect more than that long term. So I think this is his one crossroads of a year in which he has one more year. So I should call the next year, 2019, the crossroads year. Jamarcus Russell was great for LSU. Did not win a national championship. Torched Notre Dame in his final collegiate game in 2006 at the Sugar Bowl against Brady Quinn. Yes, he was pretty great. National Signing Day coming up next Wednesday. So we will bring you as much coverage as possible. If you were around last year for National Signing Day, I just planted myself for 3 hours and I brought on guest after guest after guest after guest after guest. And we hit on something like 33 teams, did team reports for 33 schools on National Signing Day. Of course, most of the kids have already been signed, but we still have a pretty select 10 to 15% slots open. The Hurricanes will be back next year. LSU on the clock. John Doe, thanks for chiming in. All right. Don't think there was really anything else I wanted to hit. I just wanted to say hi to you guys, let you know what was coming up on Wednesday night, let you know that we will be hitting all these topics that we've discussed in recent weeks very hard. I am going to present my conference rankings and comparisons within the next month. I will have my schedule formula for college football, the schedule formula that makes sense. I would like to go year by year and go back in time and review what happened that season that was suggested to me, and then also give you how a 14 playoff or an 18 playoff would have played out those particular years. Stick 118. Really hope Bama gets Patrick Surtain. Yeah, he is the guy out there that looks like the premier shutdown corner. Dondre, good night. We appreciate you jumping on board. Always look forward to your comments. Iowa might recruit a 3-star linebacker from Georgia. Ricky, excited about the Hawkeyes. All right. I wish we could have played Michigan in the 2006 national championship game instead of Florida. Well, of course you do. Urban Meyer saw something close to what Dabo Swinney saw on tape. He was rather optimistic about his club's chances, even though myself and just about the rest of college football nation thought that Ohio State team was what it was ranked, consensus number one. I thought they were that good. They were not on that night. Go Tigers. See you, Dondre. Good night, y'all. Really hope Emma gets Patrick Surtain. I read that. All right. All right. Definitely appreciate you guys joining Mark Rogers TV. Again, if you have any college football fans out there that are friends, family, tell them to give us a try. We try to deliver as best we can smart college football analysis for the smart fans. So that would be you. Appreciate you jumping on, and we will see you soon.